My son has my eyes. He has my smile and my stubbornness and the specific, beautiful way he throws his head back when something genuinely makes him laugh. But he has his father's voice. Low and measured even at 7 years old. Deliberate. The kind of voice that arrives in a room before the person does, that makes the people around it pay attention without being asked to. I knew this about Harris before he could form full sentences. I knew it the way I knew everything complicated about my son, with the specific, dual-register awareness of a woman who loves what she is looking at and is simultaneously terrified by what it reminds her of. So when Harris looked up at the man across the Whitfield Academy Gala Hall on a Thursday evening in October and said, in that low, deliberate, 7-year-old voice, "Sir, you dropped this," and extended a folded program toward the man with the gray streak in his dark hair and the custom suit and the stillness that communicated in every room that he occupied it by permission he granted rather than permission he was given. I stopped breathing. Because the man Harris was talking to was Possiano Milani. And I had spent 7 years building a life designed to make this exact moment impossible. I want to tell you something before I tell you the rest. I want to tell you because I have been carrying it for 7 years and because the carrying is finished now, one way or another, and the weight of an untold thing is heavier than the weight of the thing itself once you have finally set it down. I did not run because I stopped loving him. I want to be precise about that because the story I have been telling to myself, to the careful, curated version of myself that I rebuilt in Atlanta after I left Chicago, has smoothed the edges of the truth in the way that protective stories always do. The truth is not smooth. The truth is that I was 24 years old and 7 weeks pregnant, and I had just seen something I was never supposed to see, and the specific, absolute love I felt for the person growing inside me was louder than every other feeling available, and I ran. I ran. And the man I ran from became, over 7 years of careful distance, the thing I could not fully protect my son from because my son had his voice and his stillness and his way of making rooms pay attention without asking. My name is Gisela Moore. This is the night the running ended. And what happened after Possiano Milani looked down at my son's outstretched hand and took the program, what he did, what he said, what the 7 years had actually been is the part one could not have prepared for. So I'm going to tell you all of it. Subscribe before we go 1 second further. Because what Possiano Milani does when he looks up from the program in my son's hand and finds my face across that gala hall is not what I was prepared for, and it is not what you are preparing for either. You need to already be here when it happens. Whitfield Academy was not where I planned to enroll Harris. I want to be honest about the sequence of decisions that produced the Thursday evening in October, because decisions have architecture the way buildings have architecture. They're made of earlier decisions that are made of earlier decisions still. And the load-bearing ones are not always the obvious ones. So let me account for how we arrived at a gala hall in Buckhead, Atlanta, on a Thursday evening, in the same room as the man I had been building a life to avoid. I grew up in Savannah, the second of 3 daughters born to Celestine and Warren Moore, a seamstress and a high school principal who had built, between them, the specific, durable kind of household that produces people with strong backs and clear eyes and the understanding that the world's available spaces are earned rather than given. I studied communications at Spelman, graduated at 22, and took a position at a Chicago-based media consultancy that specialized in brand development for mid-market companies trying to scale. Chicago was where I met Possiano Milani. He was 31. He was the managing principal of the Milani Group, which was, at its cleanest and most visible surface, a commercial real estate and development firm with a portfolio that spanned the Midwest and reached into the Southeast. He was Italian-American, third generation, the specific, particular American-Italian kind that carries the old world in the cadences of the family and the new world in everything else. He had dark hair with the early gray that arrives in certain men in their early 30s, and that on him communicated not age, but the accumulated weight of someone who has been making significant decisions since significantly before most people begin. He was the client. I was the consultant assigned to the rebranding of his company's public-facing development division. We were professional for 4 months. We were everything else for 8. I will not tell you that I did not know what he was. I will not perform the version of the story in which I was entirely innocent of the category of man I had chosen, because the performance would be a kind of lie that this story does not deserve, and that Paciano, whatever else he is, does not deserve either. I knew the category. I knew it in the oblique, peripheral way of someone who has seen the indicators without seeing the full picture, the men who were always present in a function that required no explanation, the conversations that ended when I entered rooms, the specific quality of authority that went considerably deeper than commercial real estate and arrived in rooms before he did. I knew and I loved him anyway, which is not an excuse and is not a defense and is simply the truth of what I did. He never lied to me. I say this because it matters even though it is the kind of thing that sounds like mitigation and is not. He never told me an untrue thing. He told me he ran a complex organization. He told me the complexity was not entirely comfortable and was not something I needed to understand in full. He told me he would protect me. He did not tell me what the protection was protecting me from. But he never lied. And the distinction between the managed truth and the full truth is something I have spent 7 years understanding in the specific, adult way of someone who has had sufficient time to examine it from every available angle. I was 7 weeks pregnant when I saw what I was never supposed to see. I was at his Chicago office building on a Tuesday evening, earlier than I had said I would be, in the specific, uncalculated way of a woman who is in love and has finished her work early and has thought, simply, that she would like to see him. I had a key to the building's parking structure. I took the elevator to the executive floor. What I walked into was not a meeting. I will not describe it in full because the describing of it is not the point of this story and because there are things I witnessed that still live in the specific, sealed compartment I created for them that night and that I am not going to open here. What I will tell you is that I understood, in the 4 seconds I stood at the elevator before anyone saw me, the full picture of what Paciano Milani's organization was and what I had been adjacent to for 8 months and what the child growing inside me would be born into if I stayed. I left the building. I went to my apartment. I packed. I did not say goodbye. I did not leave a note. I was on a bus to Atlanta before midnight and I have not been back to Chicago since. Harris was born 8 months later in an Atlanta hospital, under my name, under my mother's insurance, in the specific, loving, complicated presence of my mother Celestine, who asked me no questions I was not ready to answer and held my hand through the entire labor with the specific, steady quality of a woman who understands that the most important thing she can do right now is be present. He had his father's voice from the first cry. I chose Whitfield Academy because of the scholarship. Let me say this plainly because the truth of it matters for the sequence of events. I am a successful woman. 7 years in Atlanta, built from a bus ticket and a savings account and the focused, determined resourcefulness of someone who understood that starting over required starting with everything available. I am a senior brand strategist at Delacroix and Vane, which is one of Atlanta's most respected communications firms, and I have built a client list and a professional reputation that are entirely my own and that I am proud of in the specific way you are proud of things built from scratch. So I was not putting Harris in Whitfield because I could not afford the tuition. I could afford the tuition. But the Whitfield Excellence Scholarship was merit-based and Harris was brilliant in the specific, unsettling way of children who arrive in classrooms already ahead of what the curriculum had planned and who make their teachers recalibrate by the end of the first week. His kindergarten teacher had used the word extraordinary in the spring conference, and his first grade teacher had used it again. And by the time second grade arrived and the Whitfield scholarship application came across my desk through a colleague whose daughter attended, I had understood that the scholarship was not about the tuition. It was about what Whitfield could offer a child whose mind operated at the frequency Harris's did. But I chose Whitfield for another reason too, and this is the one that took me longer to admit to myself. I chose it because it was the best. And I had been making choices for 7 years that were calibrated by a calculation that included, always, at the back of everything, the question of what a child who would eventually know his father's name would think of the life I had built for him. I did not want Harris to know his father's name and look at our life and find it insufficient. So I made every decision at the highest available standard. The scholarship application was in March. The acceptance letter came in June. Harris read it twice, with the focused, complete attention that was his constant mode, and looked up at me and said, "Is it a good school?" "It's the best school," I said. He thought about this for a moment. "Will I know people there?" "You'll meet people," I said. "That's different from knowing them, but it's how knowing them starts." He considered this with the seriousness he brought to most things. "Okay," he said, and went back to the book he had been reading. So the gala was the school's annual fundraiser. Attendance was expected of scholarship families, not required, but expected in the specific, institutional way that communicates that expectation is itself the requirement. I had attended the previous year's version, in Harris's first term, with the professional efficiency I brought to all the events that my child's life required and that I did not experience as joyful in themselves, but that I managed with the full, present attention they deserved because Harris deserved me fully present. This year's gala had a new anchor donor. I had seen the name in the program that came home in Harris's backpack 2 weeks before the event. The program was glossy and well-produced, and listed the evening's major supporters in the specific, institutional vocabulary of fundraising materials that communicate generosity without discussing the specifics of what is being generated. The anchor donor was a development and investment group that had recently expanded into the Atlanta market. The name of the group was Milani Southeast. I held the program for a long time. I stood in my kitchen on a Tuesday evening with the program in my hands and the specific, cold, clarifying quality of understanding something you had been successfully not understanding arriving all at once. But I told myself it was a coincidence. I told myself that Milani was not an uncommon Italian surname and that the Southeast development market was enormous and that there was no reason, no specific reason, to believe that the Milani Southeast Development Group was connected to the Milani Group in Chicago, which was 7 years ago and a different life and a city I had not returned to. So I attended the gala. I put on the navy dress that was correct for the occasion. I braided Harris's hair the way he liked it for formal events, 3 cornrows, clean, with the specific, satisfied precision of a child who knows what he wants and trusts his mother to deliver it. I told myself we were going to a school fundraiser. We went to the school fundraiser. And at 7:43 p.m. on a Thursday evening in October, my son Harris, who has my eyes and my smile and his father's voice and his father's complete, absorbing, total attention, bent down to pick up a program that a man had dropped and straightened up, and said, "Sir?" in that low, deliberate voice, and extended the program toward the most dangerous man I had ever loved. Passiano Milani looked down at my son's hand. He looked at the program. He looked at my son's face. And I watched from across a gala hall, with a glass of sparkling water I had stopped being able to feel in my hand, the moment that a man who had been looking for something for 7 years found it in a 7-year-old's outstretched hand without looking for it at all. He took the program. He said something to Harris that I could not hear across the distance. Harris said something back, the head tilt that meant he was engaged, the slight smile that meant the conversation had his interest. And then Passiano Milani looked up from my son's face and found mine across the room. The gala continued around us. 300 people ate and drank and bid on auction items and did not know that the world had just restructured itself in the specific, total, irreversible way of things that cannot be undone. I did not run. I had thought, in the 7 years of imagining this moment, that I would run. But I did not run. My feet stayed on the floor of the Whitfield Academy Gala Hall, and I looked at Paciano Milani looking at me, and I understood that the running was finished. He did not come to me immediately. This was the first thing that told me the 7 years had changed him in ways I had not accounted for in the version of Paciano Milani I had been maintaining in the sealed compartment alongside the memories I did not open. The Paciano of 8 years ago would have crossed the room. He would have crossed it with the specific, unhurried certainty of someone who had identified where he was going and saw no reason to approach the arrival at anything other than his own pace. But Paciano looked at me from across the gala hall and then looked back at Harris. He said something else to my son. Harris laughed, the specific, full-body laugh that I knew as one of his genuine ones, the one that was not performance, but actual delight, and said something in return. Paciano made a gesture I recognized. The slight, compressed acknowledgement of someone who has received something genuinely amusing from a source they had not expected it from. And then he looked at me again. And he stayed where he was. So I went to my son. I crossed the gala hall with the focused, measured walk of a woman who is managing everything she has at the level of the walk, who is keeping the composure in the walk because the walk is the only thing currently available to keep it in. I arrived at Harris's side and put my hand on his shoulder, the specific, claiming touch of a mother who is both greeting her child and communicating something to the man in front of them. Harris looked up at me with the bright, fully present quality of a child who is genuinely enjoying his evening. Mom, this is Mr. He looked at Paciano. I'm sorry, I didn't ask your name. Paciano, he said. And then, with the deliberateness of someone choosing the amount of information they are releasing with the precision of a person who has thought about this exact moment for a considerable amount of time, Milani. Harris received this information with the engaged seriousness he brought to most introductions. He extended his hand. Harris Moore, he said. It's nice to meet you. Paciano Milani shook my son's hand with the specific, respectful completeness of someone taking the gesture seriously. And you, he said. He looked at me. 7 years. The last time I had seen this face it had been across a parking structure, and I had been leaving it, and the leaving had been everything I had available in that moment, and I had been certain, in the specific, absolute certainty of a woman who has just witnessed something she cannot undo, that leaving was the only correct thing. I was less certain now. I had been less certain for a long time and had been managing the uncertainty with the daily discipline of someone who has decided that the decision was made and the management of it is what remains. Gisela, he said. Not Ms. Moore. Not a question. My name. In the specific, flat, direct way he had always said it, without ornamentation, without the performed warmth that most people deploy when they are trying to communicate warmth. Simply my name, as a statement of fact, as an identification, as the sentence that contained everything else. Paciano, I said. Harris looked at me, then at Paciano, then at me again with the specific, complete attention of a child who is assembling a picture from available data and who is very good at assembly. Do you know each other? He said. Children are the most precise instruments for the obvious question. They have not yet learned to manage around the thing in the room. Harris asked it the way he asked everything, directly, with the full expectation that a direct question deserves a direct answer, because that was what I had always given him. We knew each other, I said. A long time ago. Harris looked at Paciano. In Chicago, he said. I went still. What makes you say Chicago? He shrugged with the mild, unconcerned quality of a child producing information they do not understand the weight of. You have a Chicago coffee mug, he said. The one you never use. And when I asked you about it once you said someone gave it to you somewhere you used to live. He had filed this. He had filed it and retrieved it now in the specific, efficient way of a child whose mind cataloged things with the comprehensive attention of someone who would, in 20 years, be dangerous in a deposition room. But right now he was 7. And he was looking between me and the Italian man at the Whitfield Academy Gala with the processing quality of someone doing the assembly. "I should go find Mrs. Delacourt," Harris said. "She said she had something to show me about the science display." He was giving me the room. My 7-year-old, who had his father's instinct for the correct moment to create space, was giving me the room. He said to Paciano, with the complete and genuine courtesy he extended to everyone, "It was nice to meet you, Mr. Milani." "It was nice to meet you, Harris," Paciano said. And in his voice when he said my son's name was the specific quality of a man tasting a word for the first time that he has been trying to know the shape of for a very long time. Harris walked toward the science display. I watched him go. So did Paciano. "He has your eyes," Paciano said. "Yes," I said. A pause. The quality of 7 years in a pause. "And my voice," he said. Not a question. I looked at him. "Yes," I said. The gala was very loud around us. 300 people and a string quartet and the ambient sound of charitable goodwill being performed at the Whitfield Standard. None of it arrived at the specific space we were standing in, which had the quality of a room within a room, insulated by the weight of everything that needed to be said. "I want to talk to you," he said. "I know," I said. "Not here," he said. "I know," I said again. So we stood in the gala for another 40 minutes. We did not speak. We managed the room in our separate orbits. I found Harris at the science display and stood with him and talked to 2 other parents and ate exactly nothing from the past appetizers. Paciano moved through the room with the specific, contained quality he had always brought to rooms, talking to 3 or 4 people with the focused brevity of someone managing the professional dimensions of an evening while keeping the primary part of their attention elsewhere. But every time I looked for him, his eyes found mine first. Harris gave me the room. He shook Paciano Milani's hand and said it was nice to meet him and walked away because my 7-year-old has his father's instinct for the correct moment. Subscribe, because what Paciano says when we finally get to the room he wanted is not what I prepared myself for, and the reason he came to Atlanta is the part of this story that changes every account of the 7 years I thought I understood. The room was the building's small, beautiful library that the Whitfield Development Committee had made available for private conversations during the gala. I knew it was available because the event coordinator, a compact, efficient woman named Brielle who had managed every detail of the evening with the professional thoroughness I recognized as my own register applied to a different discipline, had mentioned it at the welcome address as a space for donors who needed to conduct business during the social portions. Paciano had been at the Whitfield Gala in the capacity of anchor donor. So the library was his by right of the evening's architecture, and when he indicated it at 9 p.m. with the contained, brief gesture I recognized from 100 professional situations 7 years ago, I followed. The library had the warm, specific smell of old books and good wood and the particular, quiet quality of a room that has been built to contain concentration. There were 2 chairs near the far window. Paciano sat in one. I sat in the other. So we were in the room he wanted. And for a moment neither of us spoke, which was also his method, the deliberate, patient space that he gave difficult things before he approached them. Because Paciano Milani had always been a man who understood that the most important things deserved to be approached correctly. "You left on a Tuesday night," he said. "Yes," I said. "I know what you saw," he said. I looked at him. "Then you know why I left." "I know what you thought you saw," he said. And in his voice when he said it was the specific, careful quality of someone who is not correcting me from malice, but from the accumulated weight of something that has needed correcting for 7 years and has been waiting for the room. "Paciano, let me finish," he said. Not unkindly. With the flat, direct authority that was his consistent register for things that required precision. So I let him finish. What he told me in the library at the Whitfield Academy Gala took 22 minutes and reorganized the 7 years in a way that I am still, even now, in the process of fully accounting for. The scene I had walked into on Tuesday evening in the parking structure, the scene I had spent 7 years carrying in the sealed compartment alongside the memories I had decided not to open, was not what it appeared to be. I had understood this intellectually at some level, in the specific, reluctant way of someone who has been given evidence they do not want to examine because the examination would complicate the decision they have already made. But in the 7 years of managing the decision, the examination had never been fully completed. Paciano completed it now. What I had witnessed on Tuesday evening was not Paciano issuing an order. It was Paciano receiving one from a man named Fasaro, who was the senior lieutenant of the rival organization that had been, for the 18 months preceding that evening, conducting a systematic incursion into the operational structure of the Milani Group. What I had interpreted, from 4 seconds at an elevator door with the incomplete information of a person who had not been part of the context, as Paciano directing violence, was Paciano being told that the rival organization knew about me. They had known about me. They had known about me for 6 weeks before the Tuesday evening. And the scene I had walked into was the scene of Paciano being briefed on how completely they knew, including that I was pregnant, which I had not yet told him. He stopped talking. He let that land. I held it for a moment. Then, they knew I was pregnant. Yes, he said. Before you did, I said. Yes, he said. You walked into that room and saw a briefing about your own safety. About our child's safety. He paused. And then you disappeared. And I didn't know what you had heard or what you had understood, and the search was ongoing for you and by Fasaro's people simultaneously, and for the first 4 months, every time my people were close to finding you, Fasaro's people were close in a way that made finding you first the priority. You kept them away from me, I said. I kept them away from you, he said. For 4 years. At which point they were no longer a functional threat because the situation had been resolved, and you were building a life in Atlanta and my people knew your address, and I had told them to stop. I went very still. Your people knew my address. For 3 years, he said. And you told them to stop, I said. I told them to stop, he said. Because you had built something. Because you were not in danger. Because the situation that made finding you urgent was resolved and what remained was he stopped. The honest sentence pause was the question of whether arriving in your life was something I had the right to do. The library was very quiet. You had the right, I said. And I heard, in the saying of it, the complicated truth underneath it, not that he had been wrong not to arrive, but that the question of right had been one he had genuinely asked and had answered with the restraint of someone who understood that the answer was not his alone to give. Harris, he said. Harris, I confirmed. How long have you known the voice was mine, he said. I looked at him. Before he could form full sentences, I said. He held this. The full weight of it. Does he know, he said. He knows his father is Italian, I said. He knows his father's name is Paciano. He knows, I stopped. Because the truth of what Harris knew was the part one had been managing with the daily, grinding discipline of a woman who had decided that a child deserved the truth at the level he was ready to receive it and who had been extending that readiness for 7 years. He knows the coffee mug is from Chicago, I said. And he files things. Paciano looked at me. Something moved in his face that I had not seen on it in the library yet. Not the controlled version, not the professional version. The thing underneath. He said, sir, he said. I know, I said. He was returning my program, he said. I know, I said. And he looked at me, Paciano said, the way I look at things I am trying to understand completely. The air in the library had the quality of the night I had held the program in my kitchen and told myself Milani was not an uncommon Italian surname. The specific quality of something that had been arriving for a long time and had arrived. Tell me the rest, I said. About why you're in Atlanta. So he told me. He had left Chicago 14 months ago. Not in the way of a man who leaves a city, in the way of a man who leaves a life, which is the specific, structural, irreversible kind of leaving that requires years of preparation and a level of deliberate dismantling that cannot be rushed because the things being dismantled have weight and consequence and people inside them whose futures are affected by how the dismantling is done. He had been building toward the exit for 3 years. He told me this with the flat, accurate directness that was his method for things he had decided not to manage. He had begun the process in the year after I disappeared, not immediately, not as a direct consequence of my leaving, but in the specific, incremental way of a man who has been given a reason to examine the life he is inside and who, in the examination, finds that the examination itself is the beginning of the exit. I was the reason. He said this without making it a declaration or a performance. He said it as a fact, in the vocabulary of a man who had processed it for 7 years and had arrived at the version he considered accurate. My leaving had been the specific, clarifying event that showed him what the life he was inside could not contain and would not be able to contain, and what that absence cost more than the life itself. So I looked at him. You left because I left. I left, he said, because you leaving showed me what I was protecting and what I was protecting it with, and the math did not work. But the exit had taken 3 years because the exits from the kind of life he was inside do not happen in a Tuesday and a bus ticket. They happen through the patient, sequential, careful work of someone who understands the structure they are leaving and who does not leave it in a way that creates the specific, dangerous vacuum that someone else fills badly. He had spent 3 years building the exit with the methodical precision of a man who had built his career on understanding operational structure. He had moved to Atlanta 14 months ago. He had established Milani Southeast as a legitimate development and investment group, not a surface, not a cover, an actual organization with actual operations and actual people doing actual work. The Whitfield Academy anchor donation was 6 months old. It was the kind of community investment that he was building the new version of his professional identity around, not for the appearance of legitimacy, but for the substance of it. Because Paciano Milani had never been interested in the appearance of things. You didn't know Harris was at Whitfield, I said. No, he said. I knew you were in Atlanta. I had known for 3 years. I did not search for the specific address. I did not search for Harris's school. He paused. I told my people to stop the active tracking in the year that Fasaro's organization was fully dismantled. What I retained was the knowledge that you were in Atlanta and that you were well. So tonight was not arranged, he said, with the full, direct weight of someone anticipating the question and addressing it before it arrives. I did not know. Harris walking toward me with the program was, he stopped. The honest sentence pause. The most unexpected moment I have had in 14 months of unexpected moments. I held this. I held the full, complicated, reorganizing weight of it. So he had been in the same city for 14 months. He had been at the school that my son attended for 6 months. And he had not arranged the Thursday evening, which meant that the Thursday evening had arranged itself in the specific, improbable way of things that have been building toward each other for 7 years and that arrive, when they arrive. Not with thunder, but with a 7-year-old extending a dropped program and saying, "Sir?" in his father's voice. "You should have told me you were here," I said. "Yes," he said, without defense or qualification. The honest acceptance of a man who has been told a true thing and is not interested in arguing against the accuracy. "Why didn't you?" I said. He was quiet for a moment. The deliberate, patient space he gave difficult things. "Because the last time I was in your life it ended with you on a bus to Atlanta," he said. "And because the question of whether I had the right to be in your life again was not a question I had answered clearly enough to act on." "What changed tonight?" I said. He looked at me. "Harris," he said. "Harris changed tonight." "What about Harris?" I said. He shook my hand, he said. He gave me his full name. He looked at me with the looking that I recognized. He paused. And then he left the room for us. He held my gaze. A child who leaves the room for his mother is a child who has been raised to understand what people need and to provide it. That is not an accident. That is 7 years of intentional, excellent mothering. I felt the sentence land in the specific way that compliments land when they are not performances, but observations. He's extraordinary, I said. I know, he said. He has been for 7 years. I looked at him. You've been watching. Carefully, he said. And from a distance. He paused. And I know that is complicated, and I am not asking you to make it less complicated tonight. What are you asking tonight? I said. To not be the man at the gala, he said. After tonight. Paciano told me he left Chicago 3 years after I left. He told me I was the reason. He told me he didn't know Harris was at Whitfield. Subscribe, because the twist in this story is not about Paciano. It's about what Harris already knew, and how long he had known it, and the specific, extraordinary thing my 7-year-old had been doing every Tuesday for 4 months without telling me. I found Harris at the science display at 9:47. The gala was beginning its formal closing, the last auction paddle, the thank you remarks from the headmistress, the specific, organized warmth of an evening reaching its conclusion. Harris was standing with 2 classmates near a model of the solar system, discussing, with the earnest authority of a second grader who has read considerably above grade level, the relative merits of considering Pluto's reclassification a scientific decision versus a political one. He looked up when I arrived. He made his excuses to his classmates with the specific, genuine courtesy he extended to everyone, and fell into step beside me toward the coat check. We collected our coats. We walked to the car in the specific, companionable quiet that Harris and I had developed over 7 years of being each other's primary company. The quiet that was not absence of conversation, but presence of the kind of comfort that does not require it. He buckled his seatbelt. He looked out the window at the Whitfield building for a moment. He looked at you like he knew you, Harris said. We knew each other, I said. I told you. No, Harris said, with the precise correction of a child who has cataloged the distinction. Not like he used to know you. Like he still knows you. It's different. I held the steering wheel. I looked at my son in the rearview mirror. Harris, I said. I know his name isn't just Paciano Milani, he said. The car was very quiet. What do you mean? I said. In the flat, careful voice of a mother who is managing the quality of her response while her heart is doing something loud in her chest. I mean, I know who he is, Harris said. With the matter-of-fact quality he brought to most revelations, the quality of someone who has been carrying information and has decided the moment for it has arrived. I've known for 4 months. How? I said. He reached into his jacket pocket, and I understood, seeing the gesture, that he had come to the gala prepared, which told me that the Tuesday evening was not, from Harris's side, the encounter I had thought it was. He produced a folded piece of paper. He handed it to me over the back of the seat. I unfolded it. It was a printout. A photograph, printed in the good quality of someone with access to a decent printer. The photograph was from a professional profile page, a development industry publication, a legitimate business source. The photograph was of Paciano Milani, identified by name, identified as the principal of Milani Southeast, identified as the anchor donor of the Whitfield Academy Excellence Fund. In the photograph's background, visible in the corner, not the subject of the photograph but present in it, was a coffee mug. The same shape as mine. The same color. A Chicago skyline. The school newsletter, Harris said. 4 months ago. There was a section about the new anchor donor. I looked him up. He paused. And then I found the coffee mug in your things. I looked at my son in the rearview mirror. Harris, I said. I didn't say anything, he said, because I didn't know if you knew he was here. And I didn't want to, he stopped. The pause of a child choosing his words with the care of someone older. I didn't want to make you sad. The street outside the car had the quiet, specific quality of a Thursday evening in Buckhead moving toward its end. The Gala building behind us had its lights on still. And my 7-year-old was looking at me in the rearview mirror with the combination of his father's directness and my eyes and the specific, profound love of a child who has been protecting his mother from information he was afraid would hurt her. "You've known for 4 months," I said. "Yes," he said. "And tonight," I said. "I saw him first," he said. "Before you did." I saw his face and I knew. He looked at the printout in my hands. So I went over to him. He paused. The program was actually already on the floor. I didn't drop it on purpose. But I wanted to see if he stopped again. "If what?" I said. "If he was like the mug," Harris said. "If he was something you kept but didn't use." The sentence arrived in the car with the full, clarifying weight of a 7-year-old's precise and accidental poetry. I looked at my son. I looked at him with the specific, total, complete love that has been my primary experience for 7 years, the love that made every difficult thing possible, and that was, in this moment, the most complicated and most simple thing I had ever felt simultaneously. "He talked to you," I said. "He asked my name," Harris said. And I gave him my full name. And he said he paused. He said Moore is a good name. And I said it was my mom's name. And he said yes. "Yes," I said. "Like he knew," Harris said. "Like he already knew whose name it was." I set the printout on the seat beside me. I looked at the building one more time. So I sat in the car with my son for a long moment in the specific, particular quiet of two people who have been keeping separate versions of the same truth and have just discovered that the separate versions were the same all along. "Is he my dad?" Harris said. Not the searching quality. Not the question of a child who is uncertain. The question of a child who knows the answer and is asking for the confirmation, the same quality I had heard in the library when Paciano had asked if Harris knew. "Yes," I said. Harris nodded. The specific, settled nod of someone who has received the confirmation of what they already knew. "Okay," he said. He looked out the window. He seemed nice. "He is," I said. And meant it in all the complicated ways the sentence contained. "Can I meet him?" he said. "Properly." I looked at my son. I thought about the library and the 22 minutes and the man who had told his people to stop 3 years ago and who had moved to the same city and who had not arranged Thursday evening because Thursday evening had arranged itself. "Yes," I said. "I think you can." I called Paciano the next morning. Not from the careful, managed distance of someone who has decided what the call means before they make it, from the honest, direct position of a woman who has spent the night processing what a 7-year-old and a library conversation have together produced, and who has arrived at the place where the next thing must be addressed. He answered on the second ring. "Gisela," he said. "Harris knew," I said. "Before last night. He's known for 4 months." A pause. The quality of something being absorbed. "How?" he said. "The school newsletter. The anchor donor feature." He found the photograph and matched it to the coffee mug. I paused. "He is his father's son." Paciano was quiet for a moment. "He went to me deliberately," he said. "He wanted to see if you were something I kept but didn't use," I said. Another pause. Longer. The deliberate, patient space. "That is the most precise thing a 7-year-old has ever said about me," he said. "He's extraordinary," I said. "I told you." So we talked. Not the managed version, the full version, in the specific, direct register that we had both been building toward since the library, and that felt, now that we were inside it, like the only register available. We talked for 90 minutes. I sat at my kitchen table with the Chicago coffee mug, the one Harris had found, the one I had kept and not used for 7 years, and I talked to the man who had given it to me. But the question I needed to ask was not the simple one. The simple questions were addressable. What did he want going forward? What he imagined the shape of things might be? Whether he understood that the pace of any development was going to be set by Harris's comfort and Harris's understanding and Harris's readiness, rather than by the urgency of 7 years, resolved in a library and a gala hall. He understood all of this. He said so with the flat, accurate directness of someone who had thought about it before the call and who had arrived at the understanding on his own rather than because I was communicating it. The question I needed to ask was the harder one. The one that lived in the sealed compartment. The night I left, I said, when you understood what I had seen, when you understood what I had understood, incorrectly, about what was happening, why didn't you find me faster? You had resources. You had people. For months Fasaro's people, he said, were ahead of mine in the first weeks. And then he stopped. The honest sentence pause. And then I found your mother. I held the phone. Celestine, he said. I called her in the second month. I told her I was looking. I told her the looking was not punitive. He paused. She told me you were well. She told me you were somewhere safe. She told me. He stopped again. What did she tell you? I said. She told me you were pregnant, he said. She didn't confirm it. But she said my daughter has everything she needs. And the way she said it. My mother. Celestine Moore in Savannah, who had held my hand through Harris's entire labor and had asked me no questions I was not ready to answer, and who had, in the second month of my running, on a phone call from a man I had spent 7 years presenting to myself as the reason for the running, told him my daughter has everything she needs. She kept it from me, I said. That you called. I asked her to, he said. I told her I would not pursue the location if she could tell me you were safe. That if she could tell me that, I would give you the time you needed. He paused. She said she needed to think about it. She called me back the next day. She agreed, I said. She said she would tell me if you were ever in danger, he said. And that otherwise she would maintain the condition. The kitchen was very still. I thought about my mother. About the specific, profound love of a woman who had understood, in a phone call from a man her daughter had run from, what the situation actually contained, not the threat, but the more complicated truth that the threat was the surface of something else, and that her daughter needed the time to build what she was building before the surface could be addressed. She never told me, I said. No, he said. For 7 years, I said. 7 years, he said. I thought about Celestine Moore in Savannah, the seamstress who had raised 3 daughters with strong backs and clear eyes, the woman who had held my hand through the whole labor, the woman who called every Sunday evening and never asked about Harris's father and never failed to ask about Harris. I need to call her, I said. I know, he said. After I said, I want to ask you something first. Ask, he said. If tonight had not happened, I said. If Harris had not gone to you at the gala, if we had not ended up in the library, were you ever going to come to us? The pause was the longest one. The deliberate, patient space given to the most important things. Yes, he said. But I needed to be certain that what I was bringing to you was the right version. Not the version you ran from. The version that had done the work. He paused. I needed to be able to walk through your door as someone Harris could know. Someone Harris could know, I said. Yes, he said. I held the coffee mug. I thought about the version of the man I had kept but not used. So I set the mug down, for the first time in 7 years, in the center of the kitchen table, where it could be used. Saturday, I said. If you are available. There is a park 2 blocks from our apartment. Harris has a standing Saturday morning routine there. I'll be available, he said. It will be ordinary, I said. A park. A 7-year-old. No gala. Good, he said. I am better at ordinary than I was 7 years ago. I believed him. Not because I needed to believe him, and not because the library had resolved everything, because I had been paying the specific, full, professional attention of a woman who reads people for a living. And what I had read in the library and on the phone was consistent. The same man in different configuration. The configuration that had done the work. Saturday, he said. Saturday, I confirmed. My mother knew me for 7 years. She made a deal with Paciano Milani in the second month of my running and kept it for 7 years. Subscribe, because when I call Celestine Moore in Savannah, What she says about why she made the deal is the answer that makes the 7 years make sense in a way I was not prepared for. My mother answered on the first ring. She always answered the first ring for me. This was one of the fixed, reliable things about Celestine Moore. Her availability to her daughters was not a choice she made moment by moment, but a standing condition, a permanent posture that had been in place since before I could remember and that I had, in 7 years of building a life in Atlanta, depended on in the specific, foundational way that people depend on the things they do not examine, because the examining is not necessary when the thing is simply true. Gisela, she said. He called me, I said. 2 months after I left. Didn't he? A pause. Not a surprised pause, the pause of someone who has been expecting a specific call for a specific time and has now received it. Yes, she said. And you made a deal with him, I said. I made a decision, she said. He called and he told me he was looking and that the looking was not punitive. And I listened to him talk about you, not what he wanted, what you were, what you had been to him, and I decided what the truth was. What did you decide? I said. That he was not the threat, she said. The threat was the people he was managing. And that he was managing them specifically to protect you. She paused. He told me about the night you left. He told me what you saw and what you understood about what you saw. And I listened to a man who had been searching for my daughter for 8 weeks and who was talking about her the way someone talks about the thing they have organized their entire life around protecting. Mama, I said. Let me finish, she said. In the same register as when she had said it to me at 6 years old when I had tried to interrupt a correction, which told me that this conversation had been prepared and deserved its full run. I told him you were well, she said. I told him you had what you needed. And I told him that if the day came when you were in danger, real danger, not the constructed danger of a story a young woman was telling herself to make a difficult decision feel cleaner, I would call him. She paused. Because I am your mother. But I am also a woman who has been reading people for 63 years, and I know what a man sounds like when he is describing the thing that has made him honest. I was quiet. You kept this for 7 years, I said. You needed 7 years, she said. You needed to build what you built. You needed to be the woman who could stand in a room with him and know your own mind. You needed Harris to be Harris. She paused. If I had told you in the second month, you would have made a decision from the position of a 24-year-old who had just run from something and who had not yet built the thing that would give her the ground to stand on. You decided that for me, I said. I did, she said. Without apology. With the flat, direct accuracy of a woman who has made a decision she stands behind. And I would make it again. So I sat with this. I sat with the specific, complicated weight of a mother who had held my hand through a whole labor and had also been holding a 7-year secret in the other one. I sat with the anger, which was real and which I am not going to pretend did not exist, and I sat with the other thing underneath it, which was the specific, complicated love of a woman who understood, after a night in a library and a morning on the phone, that the decision her mother had made was the decision of someone who had read the situation more clearly than she had. He's in Atlanta, I said. I know, she said. He moved 14 months ago, I said. 11, she said. He was in the city for 3 months before he told me he was moving the business there. He told you, I said. He checks in, she said. Not about you. About whether there is anything I need him to know. She paused. There hasn't been anything. Until last night. Last night, I said. He texted me, she said. After the gala. He told me he had met Harris. A pause. He said he gave me his full name and shook my hand. He is everything. I held the phone. The specific, arriving weight of a sentence from a man who had shaken my son's hand at a school gala and gone home and texted my mother the way a person communicates something that is too large for them to carry alone. I need to come to Savannah, I said. I know, she said. Bring Harris. He knows, I said. I know he knows, she said. He called me 3 months ago. I went still. Harris called you. He found the photograph, she said. He called me and asked me if the man in the photograph was his father. And I told him. She paused. I told him I thought it was something his mother needed to tell him, but that he should not be afraid of the answer. My son, my 7-year-old, who had his father's voice and his father's way of making rooms pay attention and his father's complete, absorbing, total attention directed at the things that mattered, had called his grandmother in Savannah and asked the question, and then gone back to Tuesday mornings and the solar system display, and the dinosaur who was afraid of the dark and had waited. He had been waiting too. Saturday, I said to my mother, "We're meeting him at the park." "Good," she said. "It's time." "Was it always going to be time?" I said. "It was always going to be time," she said. The question was when the time was going to be enough of the right kind. So I held the phone after we said goodbye, and I sat in the kitchen with the Chicago coffee mug in the center of the table where it could be used. And I thought about the specific, patient, structural love of the women in my family, my mother who had held a 7-year secret in the other hand and called it protection, and I thought that Harris had inherited both of us simultaneously, which explained a great deal about the quality of the child I had been given the extraordinary privilege of raising. Saturday morning arrived with the specific, ordinary quality of the best mornings, clear and cold in the early fall way, the light coming in through the kitchen windows at the angle that meant we had enough time before the park without rushing. Harris ate his breakfast with the focused, unhurried attention he brought to food when he was thinking about something. He ate all of his eggs before he said anything. Then he looked at me across the table. "Are you nervous?" he said. "Yes," I said. He nodded. The settled, accepting nod. "Me too," he said. "But I think it's the good kind of nervous. The kind you get before something that matters." I looked at my son. "When did you get so wise?" I said. "I read a lot," he said. So we walked to the park 2 blocks from our apartment on a clear October Saturday morning, Harris with his hands in his jacket pockets and his head at the slight tilt that meant he was processing something, and me with the specific, present, full-body awareness of a woman who is walking towards something she has been running from for 7 years and who has decided that the walking is the correct direction. Paciano was already there. He was on a bench near the open grass section, not the central bench, the one near the edge, which was the choice of someone who had understood that arriving in the center of the space would have been a claim and that the edge was the correct position for a person who is entering someone else's territory with the appropriate respect for whose territory it is. He saw us from a distance. He stood, the same automatic, genuine gesture as the gala, the respect that was habit rather than performance. Harris looked at him from 50 feet away with complete, total, searching attention. Then he looked at me. "He's nervous too," he said. "How do you know?" I said. "Because he stood up before he needed to," Harris said. "People do things before they need to when they're nervous." I looked at my son. And then I looked at Paciano, who was standing at the edge of the park with the gray streak in his dark hair and the specific, contained stillness that was his primary register, and that was, this morning, not quite as contained as usual. Harris was right. He was nervous. So was I. But it was the good kind. We walked to the bench. Paciano looked at Harris with the full, complete, absorbing attention that Harris had inherited from him, directed at his son in the specific, foundational way of someone encountering the most important thing they have ever encountered and being, for the first time in a professional lifetime, of being fully composed, not quite composed. Harris extended his hand. "Harris Moore," he said. "We met at the gala." "We did," Paciano said. He shook the hand. "Paciano Milani." "I know," Harris said. "I knew at the gala. But it's polite to introduce yourself properly." "It is," Paciano agreed. Harris sat down on the bench. He looked at the open grass. Then at Paciano. "Do you know about the solar system?" he said. Paciano sat. "Some things," he said. "I know about the solar system," Harris said. "I can tell you what I know, and you can tell me where you need more information." So the three of us sat on a bench in a park in Buckhead, Atlanta, on a Saturday morning in October, and my son educated his father about the solar system with the earnest, focused authority of a 7-year-old who has read considerably above grade level and who considers the sharing of information one of the primary courtesies available. Paciano listened with the complete, unhurried attention that was the most fundamental thing the two of them shared. He asked questions that were genuine rather than performed, questions that produced in Harris the specific, delighted quality of a child who has discovered an audience that is not managing their interest, but actually has it. But I sat beside them on the bench and I said almost nothing. I did not need to say anything. The morning was doing what mornings do when two people who have never met but who share the same quality of attention encounter each other for the first time. It was doing the work of becoming something. At the 40-minute mark, Harris stood. "I want to see the pond," he said. He looked at Paciano. "Are you coming?" Paciano looked at me. The question in the look was not about the pond. I gave him the slight, settled nod that said yes to all of it, the pond and the rest of the park and the Saturday morning and the question that the morning was beginning to answer. He stood. So did I. The three of us walked toward the pond, Harris in the center, and I thought about 7 years. I thought about the sealed compartment and the bus ticket and the 4 cities and all the choices made with the daily, grinding discipline of a woman who loved her son more than her own peace. I thought about a school newsletter and a coffee mug and a gala program picked up from the floor. I thought about my mother on a phone call in the 2nd month, making the specific, patient, structural decision of a woman who reads people clearly and had decided what was true. I thought about what Harris had said in the car. Is he like the mug? Something you kept but didn't use. I had kept him for 7 years in the sealed compartment alongside the memories I did not open. And the keeping, I understood now, was its own form of using. You do not keep things you have finished with. You keep things that still belong to you in some register that you are not yet ready to account for. At the pond, Harris found a flat stone and looked at Paciano with the complete, expectant attention of a child about to assign a task. "Do you know how to skip stones?" he said. "My father taught me," Paciano said. "Can you teach me?" Harris said. Paciano crouched down beside my son at the edge of the pond. He showed him how to hold the stone, the flat palm, the angle of the wrist, the specific, patient mechanics of something that requires practice to do correctly, but that is worth practicing. Harris listened with the focused, total attention of a student who has decided the teacher knows what they are doing. The stone skipped 4 times. Harris looked at the water where the stone had been. Then he looked at Paciano. "Again," he said. So they found another stone. And I stood at the edge of the pond on an October Saturday morning and watched my son learn something from his father for the first time, and I held the full, complicated, present weight of the 7 years and what they had cost and what they had built and what this specific, ordinary morning was the beginning of. The park was full of ordinary Saturday things. Families and dogs and children with their specific, uncomplicated joy. None of them knew that the woman standing at the edge of the pond had run from the man crouching beside her son for 7 years and had arrived, this morning, at the end of the running and the beginning of the figuring out. At 11:30, Harris declared he was hungry. He looked at both of us with the complete, practical expectation of a child who has decided that the morning has been productive and that the morning's natural continuation is food. "Breakfast," he said, directed at both of us equally. Not at me, at both of us, with the specific, inclusive authority of a child who has decided the configuration of the morning and considers it settled. I looked at Paciano. He looked at me. "There's a place 2 streets over," I said. "They have very good eggs." "I like eggs," Paciano said. "I know," Harris said. He was already walking. "I read somewhere that Italians eat eggs differently. I want to ask you about it." So Passiano Milani and I followed my son out of the park and toward the breakfast place 2 streets over, and Harris walked between us with his hands in his jacket pockets and his head at the thinking tilt, and I thought, this is what the running was building toward. Not the end of it. Not the library conversation or the park or the stone skipping. The building of a boy who had his father's voice and his mother's eyes and the specific, extraordinary quality of someone who understood, at 7 years old, that the most important thing available in most situations was the full, direct, honest extension of yourself toward the thing that matters. He had done that at the gala. He had picked up a program and said, "Sir," and extended it toward the man he had been searching for. And the man had not walked away. That was the whole story, really. The rest of it, the 7 years and the sealed compartment and the library and my mother and Savannah and the phone calls and the Saturdays to come, was the architecture of the moment. But the moment was a 7-year-old's outstretched hand. And a man who, when he found his son in a gala hall by accident on a Thursday evening in October, understood exactly what was in his hands and did not let go. The end. From a school gala in Buckhead to a pond in a Saturday morning park, Gisela Moore's story proves that the things we keep are the things we have not finished with. The coffee mug stayed on the shelf for 7 years. My mother held a secret in the other hand for 7 years. My son called his grandmother 3 months before the gala and asked the question, and went back to Tuesday mornings and waited. And Passiano Milani moved to the same city 14 months ago and donated to the school where his son was enrolled and did not arrange Thursday evening because Thursday evening arranged itself. Some things move toward each other with the specific, patient patience of things that know where they are going. Harris knew. Celestine knew. The stones skipped 4 times on the first try. Hit subscribe for next week's story. A woman who spent 9 years as the emergency contact for a man she was told had no family discovers, on the day he is admitted to hospital for the last time. A box in his apartment addressed to her with a letter dated 14 years ago. What is inside the box changes the account of 9 years in the time it takes to read one page. See you there. So, real talk, when Harris said, "Is he like the mug, something you kept but didn't use," was that the most precise sentence in this entire story? A, yes, because it named the thing Gisela had been managing for 7 years without naming it, and a 7-year-old said it in a car on a Thursday night. B, no, the most precise sentence was Celestine saying, "My daughter has everything she needs," on the phone with Passiano in the 2nd month, because that sentence held 7 years together. C, both sentences, Harris named what his mother was doing, and Celestine named what his mother needed, and between the two of them they built the architecture that made Saturday morning possible. D, the most precise moment was Passiano texting Celestine after the gala that Harris was everything, because a man who texts his former partner's mother after meeting his son for the first time has already decided something that has nothing to do with the organization he left. Drop your answer below. And tell us, have you ever been protected by someone keeping a secret from you? Did you understand the protection when you found out, or did the finding out feel like a different kind of thing entirely? Also, Harris called his grandmother 3 months before the gala and asked the question, and then went back to Tuesday mornings and waited. What does a child's capacity to wait for the right moment tell us about what children actually understand about time? Sound off in the comments. Because this story is about one thing underneath everything else, the specific difference between running from something and building toward something, and the moment you understand that the building was the running, and the running was the building. And both of them were making the same Saturday morning possible all along. What do you think?